Chapter 1, Extra 24 Hours. It was a month ago when Zhang Hong first found out that he had 24 hours more than others. It all started with his watch, a Swiss Tissot automatic 3-analog timepiece, which was a gift from his parents who were away in Iceland for his 18th birthday. It had been purchased in the most perfunctory manner from Dobeo 1, and then delivered by the seller. To boot, it was addressed to the wrong class. Zhang Hong no longer had it in him to grumble about these two people before he even graduated from primary school. The two immortals, one had already packed their bags and made haste for Europe to get started with a whole new life. His parents, who had met in an academic exchange conference, were both theologians who specialized in religious and mythological studies. Naturally, in their materialism one-oriented homeland, theirs was not a popular field. However, unlike deceitful Shen Gun's one, Zhang Hong's parents were the real deal. One had graduated from the University of Oxford majoring in Nordic and Greek mythology, whereas the other was a Durham University graduate who had published several papers Christian mythology, proving to be quite an influence in this field. In the end, they found themselves having trouble fitting in back home in China. By chance, his father's academic advisor took over a large project and was short-staffed. After a brief dialogue between the couple, Zhang Hong's parents handed their son over to his maternal grandfather, and then left in a hurry to begin a hectic life of research that moved them all around the world. They returned home to visit only once a year, which meant that Zhang Hong spent his entire childhood with his grandfather. Maybe because they felt guilty about it, these two immortals never deprived the old man and their young in expenses. Excluding school fees or boarding fees, Zhang Hong's one-year college allowance was about 30,000 yuan. Although not as much as what the sports car driving Fuerdeus one get, it was considered pretty decent among the average students. Alright, back to the main subject. The whole thing with the watch was pretty weird. Zhang Hong had just woken up from a night's sleep to look at the time when he noticed that the marking at the top of the dial had changed from 12 to 24. Zhang Hong blanked out for a moment, then very calmly returned the watch to its place before drawing up his covers and continued to sleep. An hour and a half later, his friend that slept opposite him sent him a text message to inform him regrettably that the attendance for further mathematics class was taken. It was not a dream. After a 10-minute shower, Zhang Hong sat down at the desk at the foot of his bed and switched on his computer. The first thing he did was to check into Dobeo and look up 24-hour dial watch prank. The search results read, "Sorry, we cannot find you're looking for." Zhang Hong deleted the word prank. Still, nothing matched his search. Was this not a prank? Vendor. Zhang Hong rubbed his chin pensively. If he turned a blind eye on the 12 extra dials that appeared out of nowhere, the time on his watch was consistent with the one on his desktop. Upon a closer look, Zhang Hong also confirmed that this 24-dialed timepiece was the same one he had been wearing. Even the scratches on the case back and creases on the strap were consistent little details that no one else, other than he as the owner of the watch, knew. Of course, there were those hardcore pranksters who would make sure the lookalikes were undifferentiable from the real thing, but who would have so much time to spare to pull such an elaborate prank? They might as well spend such skills and zeal restoring relics in the Forbidden City. To sum it up, Zhang Hong knew that someone was messing with him. The average person would have had a fit encountering such a supernatural event. Zhang Hong, though, was not your average Joe, thanks to his immortal parents. Most parents would coax their children to sleep with fairy tales starring the little rabbit or baby squirrel. Zhang Hong's parents, on the other hand, put their professional knowledge to use, so that young Zhang Hong went to bed with Nordic mythologies and Bible stories. Even though he did not waste away the 9 years of compulsory education, and became a materialist, the foundation that had been established in him when he was younger remained. He was better at accepting situations like this, much better than most. To explain using the concept of the trending board game The Call of the Thulhu, his character's sanity points depletion was slow. Instead of feeling fearful, he found whatever that was happening to him to be very interesting. The normal watch had 12 dials, and after the hour hand completed 2 rotations, a day would have passed. Now, his limited edition watch with 24 dials only needed to complete 1 rotation to indicate the passing of 1 full day. Looking at it that way did not make it seem like a big deal at all. Once he had gotten used to it, it would feel almost natural. But Zhang Hong believed that whoever did this would not have been satisfied with just simply changing the clock face. His instinct told him that whatever that was supposed to happen would most probably happen when the needle completes 1 round. It was about 15 hours before the end of the day, and Zhang Hong did not plan to remain idle during this period of time. There was no need to attend the further mathematics class since the attendance had already been taken. The lecturer that had warned the class that an absence would mean a deduction of 5 points in their final examination. The damage had already been done. So, he decided to go down to the park and make up for the morning run he had missed. To his classmates, Zhang Heng was actually quite unique. Ever since they began attending university, the student became even wearier of getting out of bed early. This classmate of theirs was the only one insisting on waking up to go for morning runs. But for all that, he had never signed up for any competition during sports day, and rarely participated in group activities. He especially disliked gatherings. But once you have talked to him, you would find that he was not the arrogant person he appeared to be. In fact, you might even find this person to be quite interesting. A rumor about Zhang Heng being multi-talented had been circulating among the girls. Apparently, someone had returned to university before the holiday ended and saw him alone in the piano room playing Paganini's No. 3 Etude, La Campanella, the Bell, cleverly adapted by Franz Liszt from the Italian violinists the Violin Concerto No. 2 in B minor to a piano solo. Written using the cyclic form, the piece was notoriously difficult to play with various new technical methods cropping up every now and then, testing the pianist's dexterity and prowess. Some people remarked that they had seen Zhang Heng training in the archery range, and according to his roommate, he was also a member of a certain rock climbing club. These were true yet also false. Zhang Heng was not as extreme as the stories described him to be. The morning runs was a habit imposed upon him by his grandfather. He was simply used to the routine. He might be slightly faster and tougher than most people but was not nearly as good as the specially recruited student athletes. Archery was something he had only recently decided to try on a whim. With only 3 lessons under his belt, he was scarcely a novice. Rock climbing, on the other hand, was one of those things you enthusiastically sign up for and then forget about almost instantly. The piano was the only thing that he had grown up playing, but his level was only at about 8th or 9th grade. That La Campanella piece was just a recording in his phone that he had played when he was alone in the piano room. He never thought that it would get him famous. Wherefore, the unordinary Zhang Heng was actually not that unordinary. He was interested in many things, but like it or not, time is fair to everyone. Regardless of whether you value it, whether you decide to spend every minute productively or play as a useless person spending most of the time in bed, every person only has 24 hours at their disposal, not a second more, not a second less. Chapter 2, Selecting the Right Book to Read. He ran 7 laps around the field, 2,800 meters. After that, he showered in the public bathroom, changed into a clean white t-shirt and a pair of jeans, enjoyed his breakfast at a leisurely pace in the canteen, and then finally walked to the library with the book Xiao Shan Wanhu, a mirror he had finished reading. Like the morning run, reading was also one of Zhang Heng's routine, which he kept at the speed of 1 book per week. But unlike the run, reading brought him many pleasures. It was more like a pastime for him, one that he had always enjoyed. As a matter of fact, if it were not for the limitation of time, he would be reading more than just 1 book every week. After he returned the book at the service desk, Zhang Heng pulled out the phone in his pocket and opened an applet called Random Number Generator. With the setting adjusted to 8 digits, he eagerly rolled the virtual dice. Admittedly, it was not without ground that people thought that this guy was a genius. The regular person would never have thought to use this dice rolling method to choose a book to read. But there was merit, or perhaps eccentricity, to Zhang Heng's reading style. Perhaps it was because he had gone through too many books since he was child. Zhang Heng could read any kind of books. From world-famous works to Dragon Proud Sky, Xiao Bai Wen, and even The Perfect Man from Jin Zhang, Zhang Heng would soak them up like a sponge. And he got worse after that. He would still complete vapid books like Compendium of Medical Herbs and Scientific Swine Raising Handbook. To avoid the trouble of having to select a book and to experience the pure joy of having chanced upon a good book, he developed a normal distribution applet to help him pick his weekly reading material. It was such a pity that the appeal for campus research grant had fallen through, where he lacked the funding to market his invention. Zhang Heng concluded it was because the capital market lacked vision. Using the last 2 digits of the randomly generated number as a guide, Zhang Heng found himself in the management section. Although not literature like the last time, he considered it to be quite a stroke of luck. At least it was much better than the bill of quantitates for water drainage, heating, and gas engineering he got last month. Stretching out a finger, Jong Hong pulled out the title for this week, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. This was going to be a very pleasant afternoon. Jong Hong found himself a seat by the window and began to engross himself in the book. Some of you might be scoffing right now. Really? He's not going to fuss over that recently turned fairy watch of his? Well, as evident by Jong Hong's attitude, he really could not care less about it. Addressing the issue proactively was the appropriate response, but only if it was within your capability. But in the face of a supernatural phenomenon like this, where there is a lack of information, perhaps not doing anything about it is the better option. Have you not seen those classic horror films where the ghosts touch the person and the person would die? The actors or actresses had to pack their bags and go home since they were no longer part of the horror film. On the contrary, you have to pretend that it did not exist at all, keeping a cool and composed mind, and keep moving. Who knows, it might just be a frightening but harmless haunted house tour. Which is exactly why, many a times, staying calm and collected is the most important thing. Right now, Jong Hong was exactly that. No one would be able to tell that this guy had just experienced paranormal encounter. He missed class and used the time to go for a morning run, spent a whole afternoon poring over The Wealth of Nations, and then attended his elective critical thinking class. Come night, he even honored his promise to his roommates and went to the restaurant opposite for barbecue skewers one and ended the evening watching American TV series back in their dorm. At 11:30, it was lights off in the dormitory. Jong Hong's laptop had another 3 to 4 hours of battery life, but he did not want to disturb his roommate's sleep, so he powered it down. There was still another half an hour before the day ended, and while other people's watch hand had circled twice, Jong Hong's familiar yet alien analog was only about to complete one cycle. Was anything going to happen? He did not know. All he could do was wait. Earphones plugged into the MP3 and into his ears, Jong Hong spent the last 30 minutes of the day waiting quietly on his bed. Midnight. All three hands converged, pointing upwards. There was a split-second pause before the seconds hand continued to travel. Jong Hong did not notice anything unusual. Bender. Was his guess wrong? He pulled out his earphones and immediately he could sense that something was off. The surroundings, it was too quiet. Summer nights were especially full with activities, the small electrical fan above the door groaning and squeaking as it swiveled from side to side, the mosquitoes droning tiresomely at people's ears, the water tap next door dripping onto the sink, the stray cat mewing as it hurried across the plant beds downstairs, the snoring of his roommate in the bed opposite. Tonight, all of it was gone. The whole world suddenly lost its sounds, and became unprecedentedly, and eerily silent. If it were not for the faint music playing in his earphone, Jong Hong might have presumed that he had lost his hearing. Borrowing the dim light coming from the screen of the MP3, Jong Hong peered at the time on his watch. It was now 00:01. Usually, the people in the dorm opposite theirs would still be up playing League of Legends, and their loud hurrahs at their completion of a brilliant kill or narrow escape were perceptible through the thin walls separating the rooms. Jong Hong also noticed something else unusual. The date display on the right side of the watch face, instead of changing along with the time, remained the same as yesterday. An idea popped into his mind, and he jumped off his bed. He had gone to bed fully clothed. His laptop lit up in the dark, and in less than 7 seconds, the QQ login interface popped up. But Jong Hong's attention was not on the main portion of the screen. His gaze was on the toolbar at the bottom. Midnight. September 20th, 2017. Wasn't it the last moment of yesterday? Jong Hong waited for a moment, and then pressed his fingertips against his wrist, and counted to 200. That was 72 beats per minute. 2 minutes had passed, yet the time on his monitor remained at 00:00. Jong Hong's raised an eyebrow at this, but made no hasty conclusions. He walked to the bed opposite his and shook the sleeping Chen Huadong, who was the lightest sleeper in the dorm. Normally, someone getting off their bed to get a drink of water would have startled him, but this time, no matter how hard Zhang Hong shook him, he remained unresponsive. "I'm sorry, bro. Although I don't have a girlfriend, I'm not the kind of person you may think I am." Zhang Hong put his finger under his friend's nostrils and tried to have fun in such a weird atmosphere. This guy's mental state was rather excellent. After 5 minutes, Zhang Hong still could not detect any breath. If this was part of the prank, then Chen Huadong's breath-holding ability was out of this world. He could even break the Guinness World Record. So, Zhang Hong did the same, testing his 2 other roommates' breath. The results were the same as Chen Huadong's. Zhang Hong could say for certain that he really was facing a scientifically unexplainable otherworldly phenomenon. He was in a time zone that should not exist. An example would be like the river of time had purposely branched out another stream just for him. Chapter 3, Still World. Zhang Hong pushed the door of his dorm opened. The hallway was quiet. It felt like he walking in one of those hospital morgues, with only the sound of his footsteps echoing. The door to the opposite dorm was left ajar and there was a bright light pouring from it. Zhang Hong stuck his head in to take a look and saw 4 people engrossed in a computer game. On the screen, their characters were pursuing a low health point Annie 1. The skills emitted were suspended in mid-air, and the excited expressions on their faces were unmoving like 4 very lifelike statues. Zhang Hong noticed an alarm clock on of their desks. The time showed 00.00. After that, he went around to all the other dorms on the same floor. Some of them were locked before their tenants went to bed, so he could not enter them. The ones he did enter were all the same, all frozen at the very last moment of the day. In the bathroom, someone was huffing away while hiding from the dormitory caretaker. The sparks from the cigarette butt were clear as stars, but they were not spreading, and the smoke the person exhaled from the corner of his mouth was suspended in the air. Zhang Hong could not help but take out his phone and took a picture of this magical scene. When he was clicking on the camera shutter, he made another interesting discovery. In this world where the time had stopped moving, it was not only the people who were on pause, the things all around also remained in the state it was in at the very last second of the day. Just like that skill in mid-air, the electric fan in standstill, and now, this cigarette that never burns out. But there were also exceptions. To test his theory, Zhang Hong plucked the cigarette out from between the person's fingers. When the tab was tucked in between his fingers, it began to continue burning. So that was how it was. In this space of time, where he was the only one who could move about, anything that he touches would continue to function as usual, just like this cigarette, and his cell phone, computer, and MP3 player. The only thing was that the time displayed on the screens remained unchanged. However, this trick did not seem to work on humans. Earlier on, he had shaken Chen Huadong to wake him, but his friend had remained unresponsive. Then what about all the other living creatures other than humans? Intrigued, Zhang Hong returned to his room, turned on the torchlight on his phone and went near his roommates. After 2 minutes, using his 20MP soft light dual camera in the pitch black room, he finally found his what he was looking for: the most commonly seen, most detested creature in the summer, mosquito. Once this insect enters your room, you can forget about having a peaceful night. Zhang Hong's dorm was on the 3rd floor, which was considered quite close to the ground. At this height, the mosquito did not need to take the lift to move into their room. To keep those pests away, people resorted to all kinds of repellents, lighting up mosquito repellent incense, applying repellent sprays, hand mosquito nets, etc. But there were always 1 or 2 fugitives. This particular mosquito was lurking next to dorm leader Wei Jianjian's pillow, waiting for its chance to enjoy a full meal. Unfortunately for the insect, its dream was about to be crushed tonight. Zhang Heng reached out a hand, plucked the mosquito from the air by its wings, and then placed it on his palm. The insect maintained its mid-flying posture like a most dedicated actor, ignoring the target that was near to it. It looks like it doesn't work on animals either. Once the experiment was over, Zhang Heng crushed the mosquito and successfully eliminated the pest. Alas, now that he had explored the building, it was time to go out and take a look. He went to the bathroom and washed away tall traces of the crushed insect, and then continued his walk downstairs. The caretaker lady on duty was standing by the door holding a large U-shaped lock. She was probably locking up. Now, this was another distinguishing feature of higher education institutions, although some other universities had very different managerial styles on dormitory. Zhang Heng's school had a 12 o'clock curfew. But if the students for some reason had to return late, they could always wake the caretaker by tapping on her window. They would be allowed to return to their rooms once their details were taken down. Nonetheless, if this happened frequently, the student would be reprimanded and punished. Zhang Heng walked past the caretaker without so much as breaking a sweat. On a normal day, she would have stopped and questioned him. But right now, she seemed to have suddenly developed the ability to see through things. Her eyes were focused on the handle of the door, past Zhang Heng's body, as if a living person had not just walked past in front of her. That was how Zhang Heng strolled out of the dormitory building. He raised his head to take a look at the night sky as he walked through the empty campus, and finally came to the school gate. It was much busier here. While the campus was not very big, it was in a pretty good location, sitting on the edge of the third ring road, facing the main road. Nights in the city were especially long. The fried pancake stall on the overpass was packed with customers. Many of the white-collar workers who had just left their offices stopped by for supper on their way home. Not far away, a street cleaner was quietly sweeping the walkway. Under the platform, two bald uncles in suits and leather shoes were talking into their phones as they waited for the very late-night bus. Behind them, in a 24-hour convenience store, a girl with a bare hair clip sitting at the counter yawned. At precisely midnight, they froze synchronically. It was like pressing the pause button while watching a movie. The cars speeding on the road had all went still. Zhang Heng had seen what the city looked like at midnight the one time he went to the train station to pick up a friend. But this was the first time he was able to observe it up close. He could see the green onions that the pancake hawker was sprinkling onto the dish, the street cleaner's calloused hands and darkened complexion, the bald uncle's oily nose and the picture of his 1-month-old baby on the screen of his phone, the idol poster that the girl behind the counter hid under the cash register. All these little details that were overlooked every day now stood out to Zhang Heng. It was as if he was getting to know the city all over again. Zhang Heng used his WeChat to unlock a mobike. While riding through the city, he also tested his presumptions. Before the hour hand on his watch had completed its second rotation, he hurried back to his dorm before the caretaker lady could lock the door. At midnight, Zhang Heng was not wearing any earphones. The next second, sounds and noises poured into his ears like water. Nice. I'm going to kill that person. I can finally use my infinite blade. Push tower. They don't dare to go against us. I can't. I have to go back and replenish my HP. The electric fan above the door creaked as it oscillated. Outside the window, a feral cat wailed. In the hallway outside, slippers slapped the floor as someone ran past. Zhang Heng, who had not closed his night for more than a day, was finally overcome exhaustion. After plugging in his phone to the charger, he threw himself onto his bed and entered dreamland. Bender.